Because I forgot to film some proper footage for the intro, enjoy a questionably recorded landing into a foggy Shanghai. At least I hope it was fog. I wasn't outside, so I think it'll be fine. But after way too long, we now have a proper travelling series again. It's almost like that was the whole point of making this channel. To set a bit of context, in September 2019 I booked a trip to this place called Japan. I just recently started to teach myself some Japanese, following a wild trip to the US the year before, and from what I knew about the place, it seemed neat. This was before the trend of people actually going to Japan. I was ahead of the time, but unfortunately I booked a trip for March 2020, and well, we know what happened to any trip that was booked in March 2020. So I found myself doing something very different at that time, and the furthest I went from home that year was to the Scottish border, which is nice, but it's not exactly Japan. Due to time, finances, and the messed up world of international travel we've been dealing with ever since 2020, I figured that after crossing the US, Northern Europe, and even Scotland on a bicycle, it was time to revisit the roughly 2-week itinerary that I had made up in 2019 and have a go at actually doing it for Easter 2024. A few things have changed since then. My Japanese is probably worse. My knowledge of the transport system is actually much better. And now I wasn't going to be making the trip alone as originally planned. A voice familiar to those who've watched the main channel over the last few years will be joining me, as myself and Jimsf swap Japanese video games for, well, real Japan. As I was landing in Shanghai after an overnight flight from London that felt like it lasted 3 days, Jimsf was over the Pacific on his own flight that was helpfully delayed by 3 hours. Of course, I wouldn't know that until a few hours later when I myself arrived in Tokyo and I was actually able to communicate with the outside world again after getting my first experience at the Great Firewall of China. But that being said, after all that experience of relatively straightforward, if slightly weird at times, journey, I was now in Japan. With my travel companion, of course, over the Pacific on his delayed flight, there wasn't much practical stuff I could do in Narita ahead of time, as it would turn out that to redeem any reservation for a tourist, you would need to present your passport to prove you're a tourist, which is fine until one of those passports is over the Pacific. So I was just left to my own devices to wander the airport and discover it has a very good observation deck. So if you can hear me over the wind, all is forgiven at Narita because of this deck. What more do you want? Okay, Jimsf can take as long as he wants, it'll be grand. Some other practical advice I've learned about Narita Airport. One, there is an ATM machine that does not charge for foreign transactions. It's the pink one up in the North Departure Lounge next to the Bureau de Change. Don't get caught out, there are 3 ATMs here. One of them does not charge a fee, the rest do, so make sure you check that. The other thing I discovered is that for the Keisei Skyliner, as much as you think booking your reservation in advance is a sensible idea, and they might be running some sort of special offer where you get a discount on the 72-hour subway ticket, such as the one that we were using. To be honest, if I was doing it again, I would not reserve any tickets. Just buy them on the machine when you wander up there, because there's no queues for the machines. There is a queue to redeem the reservation you made online, because it doesn't actually reserve your seat, you just... Keisei Skyliner, my review of it is the train is great, the service is convenient, but the problem is you spend as much time queuing to get on the train as the train actually takes. Because why can't we have electronic tickets? Why can't I just make a seat reservation online? And if I can buy a ticket online, why is it less convenient to do that than it would be if I just rocked up and bought a ticket at a ticket vending machine, or even the Keisei desk? The normal Keisei desk. They have a special one for the Skyliner. Work that one out. I think next time I'll be trying the Narita Express, which is run by JR. Seeing if that experience is any better. But anyway, my grumblings aside, 40 minutes later, we were at Ueno, a place I took 3 days to learn how to pronounce, and we are presented with, well, pretty much what we expected.
I mean, of course there'd be a pachinko slot. Why would there not be a pachinko slot? Arcade or whatever here. And Kobe beef, even though we're not in Kobe. But they have the Kobe beef.
We skipped the beef and just headed straight for bed. We emerged the next morning to a clear blue sky in Osaka, and having been in Tokyo less than 24 hours, we immediately headed 3 stops down the metro line to Akihabara, the electric town. There are several reasons why you would go to Akihabara. Maybe you want electronics, maybe you want anime figures, maybe you want to sip coffee while a waitress dressed as an emo maid threatens to give you the cannibal treatment. Or maybe you're just here to see what all the fuss is about. Regardless, it will be a sensory overload of vivid posters, bright lights and catchy jingles. Originally a black market after World War II, this district soon became a centre of consumer electronics, and with the age of the computer starting in the 1980s, it pivoted towards the new technology and ended up attracting a new, more nerdy clientele, the otaku. And thus today you get a mix of consumer goods, niche electronics, manga and game stores, cosplay cafes and anime merch that defines the modern Akihabara, all living in harmony. As our first day out, this was also our first experience of the Japanese phenomenon of the konbini, as a cheap source of, well, pretty much anything you want.
Well, that's the thing, given you can get one of these for like 145 yen, you're like, why would you?
That's crazy to me how cheap things are here. It's like how America used to be.
Yeah.
You used to be able to get a bottle of pop for $1.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah. It explains why people live out of convenience. They're like, okay, I get it now. Understand. I mean, it'll probably kill you from cancer after like 2 years, but you know.
Cancer. Like an attempt at a rally.
I'm pretty sure by Japanese standards this is like outrageous. It's like big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, that's pretty much the same for like any sort of thing like this in a public square. It's like, making a lot of noise, you put signs, but generally everyone's like, what are you on about? What are you here for?
Is it watching going on?
I don't know, that's even if there is one. I don't know, I'm going to see trains, I'm just happy. So it's all good.
After our first of several trips that we would make to Akihabara over the next few days, we made our way to Chiyoda, to the first shrine of the trip, and I may have picked a slightly controversial one to start off. On the face of it, Yasukuni Shrine is a grand park featuring the largest iron tower in Japan, and an impressive shrine building honouring the war dead of Imperial Japan, which would be from the Meiji era to 1945. And you might see where this can get awkward, as, while the vast majority of the over 2 million names enshrined here are as innocent as a soldier can be, there is a small issue of the over 1,000 convicted war criminals who are given the same honour as the rest of them. As a result, the shrine sits apart from the other shrines and to this day is boycotted by the Emperor, who only resides across the street, so it's not a question of logistics. While I didn't particularly come here to pay respect to criminals, as I don't think really anyone does, I'm glad it did come here, as it confirmed several things. One, the overall nature of the visitors is well-intentioned. To be honest, they're mostly here for the food stalls that were out earlier and the cherry blossoms. And two, Japanese military reenactors are still very keen on showing the imperial flag. There seems to be not much in the way of taboo about that. But number three, as I say, a good number of people do pay respect to this shrine. Nearly as much as we saw at any other shrine we came across. The only one that actually came close was Meiji Jingu, which is one of the most sacred shrines in Japan, so that's what you'd expect. I can't really comment just from observing, so I didn't stop people and say, hey, are you here to, pay respect to an ancestor or a relative, or just the general concept of the honourable Japanese soldiers of Imperial Japan, or the general concept of that, or are you kind of like, yeah, no, they were all good, there was definitely nothing bad ever done, and it does make an interesting wonder for those who are, blatantly not revisionist who are saying, yeah, Imperial Japan did nothing wrong, because that's obviously a very small minority of people. But it is interesting to wonder how does the average Japanese person feel about honouring the war criminals the same way as, well, everyone else. And aside from these observations and questions that this brings around, the shrine underground are generally well kept and pretty, and the sakura, it was nearly blooming, with the first blossoms appearing on a few trees around the site, and these were also attracting a lot of attention.
So the other way, like, you can tell which trees are like blooming or getting near to bloom, so the ones where everyone's standing at the bottom of.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you're not sure where the blossoms are? Look for the big crowd.
Yeah.
But we hadn't made the trip to Chiyoda solely just to observe some controversial shrines. As mentioned, the Emperor resides only across the street in the Imperial Palace grounds, and within these grounds is Nippon Budokan, the arena that was built to host judo for the 1964 Olympics, but soon after also started to host concerts, with the first being the Beatles in 1966. So it was fitting on just our second night in Japan, I went to Minami's first concert in Budokan, which was to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of her first full album release, and it was amazing.
So, most of the crowd are heading straight for the nearest metro station, which is, as you can imagine, being swamped at the moment. So I'm going to take the long way home, because it's fun. If you want the short review of that concert, expletive amazing. That was so fun. And he put some proper thoughts together, because it was definitely an experience of seeing, well, a Japanese concert, but so cool.
I've had to put up some official images posted by our staff and band members afterwards, because the first difference you find with a concert in Japan is that absolutely no one takes photos or videos during the concert. Sure, everywhere else you're told not to do that, but it's obviously never enforced. And while it might seem like a small thing at the time, in retrospect I realise I'm young enough that I've never been to a concert where nobody is holding up their phone in the air. You can always see somebody's phone in the air. It's just accepted as part of life, and I'm not one of these people who gets too hung up about it, right? But it's just part of life now. And the side effect of this is, for a number of artists, especially in the modern age, they never reveal their faces publicly. You won't find images of them. So the only people who know what they actually look like are those who actually go to their concerts. And sure, there are actually a few photos of Minami's face out there on the internet. They're not hard to find. Like, about 3 seconds of Googling will find you there. But for me anyway, because I never actually searched it out, when she walked onto the stage, that was the first time I'd actually seen her. And probably for a lot of people in the arena too. Anyway, for the music review from this obviously clearly biased Minami fan, the setlist was great, the energy was unreal, every song had a slight tweak for live performances, and I love when that happens. Especially to highlight the piano version she did of Timegram. Very, very good. Excellent. And she even played a yet-to-be-released song for the first time ever, which is cool. It's like to say, wow, when this eventually comes out in a few months when it's fully finished, it's like, hey, I heard that for the first time it was ever played publicly. And I didn't think beforehand how fun IOA was going to be to see live. And that was an experience in itself, to see an audience who only a few minutes ago were listening respectively and attentively, and suddenly we're turning into a football hooligan crowd with jumping and chanting, and it's just a great time for everyone involved. Needless to say, I think this got the trip off to a very good start.
Just an observation. Well, I've been in Japan now just over 24 hours, and the Japanese have a reputation of essentially being perfect robots who would never break a single rule or convention. Yeah, that's a complete lie. It's similar to the lie that the Germans don't have a sense of humour, given that the park to my left is closed, and very clearly signposts are closed, and there's millions of people in there. Yeah. They ignore the signs, they ignore instructions. They're generally much better than most places, but don't kid yourself. I guess if you want to find the differences, is that the Japanese do not tend to do anything that they knowingly harm someone, unless they intend to harm them, obviously. So essentially, light stuff they'll do, and that's kind of like pushing to the extreme. I guess that's the difference with a lot of other societies.
And after setting the bar very high for a trip straight out of the bat, I guess we'll see in the next video what the rest of Tokyo has to offer for the next few days.